The war in Ukraine rages on, and it actually rages on longer than the intelligence experts had estimated. And Ukraine is hanging in there. They continue to fight gallantly against the Russian Putin invasion of Ukraine. But who's going to run out of weapons first, the Russians or, well, us, the West? For a while there, I kept reading gleeful articles in the media. Oh, the Russians are going to pretty soon be out of ammunition. The Ukrainians are going to have them on the ropes. On the face of it, this is a little bit implausible. The Ukraine is going to defeat Russia in a war. Well, Ukraine is getting a lot of help. It's getting a lot of help from the West, shipments of Western, not so much troops, no troops, but rather weaponry, artillery, and rockets, and all kinds of lethal aid. Now, the West has done this in the name of protecting, quote, the arsenal of democracy. This is some fictitious alliance of democracies around the world. There's no actual such alliance, and in fact, big democracies have stayed out of this. But nevertheless, this is the kind of public fiction. The democracies of the world are hanging together against the autocracies of the world. Well, turns out that initially the expectation on the part of U.S. intelligence was that the Russians would overwhelm the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians would be reduced to fighting a kind of Afghan-style guerrilla war over the next, year or even decade, and the United States would be supporting this insurgency in various ways, large and small. But it turns out the Ukrainians are still in the fight. And as a result of being in the fight against obviously a more sizable opponent, the Ukrainians are demanding very aggressively. Zelensky almost every day is calling for escalations. He wants more drones. He wants more anti-tank weapons. He wants more anti-aircraft weapons. He wants more ammunition. And so here is Russia pummeling the Ukraine's industrial base pretty successfully, as it turns out. By the way, recently General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, told Congress that the West has already delivered 60,000 anti-tank weapons, 25,000 anti-aircraft weapons to Kiev. And the Biden administration just recently approved a new $800 million package, helicopters, armed personnel carriers. And so the Ukrainians want more artillery, more coastal defense drones, other types of materiel. Now, the interesting thing is that no one really planned for this. No one really expected that the U.S. and the West would have to produce this kind of weaponry and deliver it at very, very short notice. They say that Kiev is blowing through, a week's worth of deliveries in like one day. And then they want more. So suddenly the Western countries are like, wait a minute, let's take a look at our own arsenal to see how much we've got to spare. Apparently Germany has decided, you know what, we're not giving Ukraine any more tanks. You know why? We need them. Then if we ever face a crisis, if somebody attacks the German border, we need German tanks. Canada says no more rocket launchers for Ukraine. Why? Because the Canadians need them. And so the United States has already given the Ukraine, I'm getting this now from a very interesting article in Bloomberg, an article written by a guy named Hal Brands. He points out the U.S. has provided 1/3 of its overall stockpile of Javelin anti-tank missiles. And the U.S. is now saying, you know what, we can't really part with all that many more because we need to protect ourselves. We need to have enough to protect ourselves. Now, the point here is that the United States spends a lot of money on the military, so it may seem like we have an unlimited supply. But what most people realize is that our military has basically become a giant welfare program. And what that means is that a large chunk of our military budget goes to things like healthcare. It goes obviously to all the idiotic woke training that the military is doing. So only a fraction of military spending is on military equipment, military personnel, direct efforts to create military readiness. And this is why we've got ships in mothballs. This is why we've got nuclear weapons that are now ancient. We don't even know if some of them will go off. The military is not exactly in good shape, and it's partly because of this kind of ideological infestation. So all of this is a serious problem. And now actually we have to use our military, or at least use our military in delivering weapons to Ukraine. And it turns out we don't exactly have a massive surplus. Another key point here is that the United States in World War II and even in the Korean War, had a massive manufacturing industrial base. We were essentially the manufacturing capital of the world. And so we could make stuff. We had the workforce to do it. We had the resources to do it. But now we don't. Now our economic leadership is not really based on manufacturing. And that's why we have shortages of machine tools, shortages of skilled labor, shortages of spare production capacity. And so we can't scale up so easily in the way that we used to. The US, the workforce that once did this for us, no longer exists. So it turns out that the United States, although despite a lot of, propagandistic bluster, the Russians are going to face another Vietnam, the Russians are on the ropes, the truth of it is that Russia is willing to pay apparently a high price to create a kind of bear grasp on Ukraine. And as for the United States, in a war in which our national interests are not clearly involved, this is not in our backyard. In fact, it's in their backyard. In this war that is really a chosen conflict for us, it seems like we may be the ones to first run out of weapons to spare.